We call it the cloud, but there is nothing weightless about it. Behind every cloud application are servers, networks, storage systems, power infrastructure, cooling systems, and enormous physical facilities. The cloud simply hides the complexity, and that was the revolution. Businesses no longer needed to think about every machine beneath their software. They could access computing as a service. Capacity became something they could rent. Infrastructure became something they could scale. And suddenly, building a digital business required far less physical infrastructure than before. But every time complexity disappears from one layer, dependency often appears somewhere else.
For decades, companies had to build computing capacity around their own operations. Servers had to be purchased. Facilities had to be maintained. Capacity had to be estimated before demand arrived. If the business grew faster than expected, infrastructure could become a constraint. If growth slowed, expensive capacity could sit unused. Computing was a capital decision. Then the cloud changed the relationship. Instead of asking, how much infrastructure should we own, businesses could ask, how much infrastructure do we need right now? That sounds like a technical improvement. Economically, it was much bigger. Computing began behaving more like a utility.
The cloud introduced a powerful idea. Capacity could follow demand. A small company could access infrastructure that once required enormous capital. A growing company could expand without rebuilding its entire physical foundation. A global company could distribute workloads across multiple regions. Computing became flexible, and flexibility has economic value. It reduces certain barriers to entry. It allows businesses to experiment faster. It allows software to scale without matching every increase with physical ownership. The result was a new generation of digital companies. Businesses could focus more of their resources on products, customers, distribution, and operations, while infrastructure became a service beneath them. Then something even more important happened. Businesses began moving more of their operations into the cloud. Applications, databases, analytics, customer systems, internal workflows, development environments, entire digital operations. The cloud stopped being an optional technology layer and became part of everyday business architecture. That created a massive structural shift. The more operations move into shared infrastructure, the more important that infrastructure becomes. But migration is not simply about moving files from one place to another. It means changing where a business's systems live, how they communicate, how they scale, and what they depend on. And this is where the real business opportunity begins. Moving technology is rarely the hardest part. Understanding what is connected to what can be harder. Legacy systems, databases, security controls, user permissions, applications, internal workflows, third-party services, business processes built over years. A company may want to modernize everything, but the old architecture often contains dependencies nobody fully remembers. So cloud transformation creates a new category of demand. Businesses need help understanding the architecture before changing it. They need systems that can migrate, monitor, secure, optimize, integrate, and manage increasingly complex environments. The cloud creates demand far beyond the cloud itself. Every major infrastructure shift creates an ecosystem around itself. Cloud computing is no different. Businesses need migration services, security, monitoring, cost management, data management, integration, compliance, automation, backup, optimization, training, specialized consulting. The infrastructure provider may supply the foundation, but thousands of other businesses can build around that foundation. This is an important pattern in digital economics. When a platform becomes infrastructure, it creates secondary markets around the problems created by scale. The opportunity is not always to compete with the infrastructure itself. Sometimes it is to solve the complexity that grows around it. But there is a paradox. The cloud makes infrastructure easier to access, while making infrastructure more deeply embedded in business operations. Once an organization builds applications, workflows, databases, and processes around a cloud environment, changing that architecture becomes a serious decision. This does not make the cloud inherently negative. It reveals something more interesting about infrastructure economics. Convenience creates adoption. Adoption creates integration. Integration creates dependency. And dependency creates switching costs. The same architecture that makes a service incredibly useful can also make it incredibly important. That is how infrastructure becomes sticky. Scale creates another problem: complexity. A small cloud environment can be relatively simple. A large one can become an ecosystem of services, permissions, workloads, data, security policies, and infrastructure decisions. At that scale, another market emerges: optimization. Businesses want infrastructure that is not only powerful, but efficient, not only scalable, but manageable, not only connected, but secure. This creates recurring demand, and recurring demand is one of the most valuable characteristics in business architecture. When the problem does not disappear after the first sale, the relationship can continue. The strongest cloud businesses are protected by more than servers. Their deeper moat can come from ecosystems, developer familiarity, integrations, data flows, security architecture, business workflows, partner networks, operational knowledge. Once enough of these layers accumulate, the infrastructure becomes difficult to replace. This is an important lesson for anyone studying digital businesses. Technology alone is rarely the entire moat. The real advantage can emerge from everything that grows around the technology: the relationships, the integrations, the habits, the dependencies, the systems built on top of the system. The cloud was never simply about putting computers somewhere else. It changed the architecture of digital business. It transformed infrastructure from something many companies had to own into something they could access. It accelerated experimentation, lowered certain barriers, enabled global scale, and created entirely new markets around infrastructure management. But the same transformation created deeper dependencies, more integration, more complexity, more demand for security, optimization, migration, and specialized services. That is the pattern Nexera keeps returning to. A system changes, friction appears, new demand forms around that friction, businesses emerge to solve it, and eventually, the solution becomes part of the next layer of infrastructure. When an entire industry moves to a new infrastructure layer, the opportunity is rarely limited to the infrastructure provider. The larger ecosystem forms around everything the transition makes necessary. Nexera. Decoding systems. Architecting wealth.